After a night with his mistress, a billionaire returns home. His pregnant wife hands him divorce papers. Jacqueline Blackwell never imagined she'd be signing divorce papers while carrying the child of the man she once believed was her soulmate. Yet here she stood, documents in hand, awaiting her husband's return after a night of extravagant indulgence with another woman. Ambrose Blackwell, a self-made millionaire revered in Manhattan's elite circles, had always straddled the line between ambition and temptation. As storm clouds gathered in the pre-dawn sky, Jacqueline's heart pounded with grim determination. All illusions of a fairy tale marriage were shattered the moment she learned of his betrayal. What unfolds next is a saga of heartbreak, shocking twists, and a relentless pursuit of a woman's dignity. Jacqueline Mitchell had dreamed of a picturesque life since she was a small-town teenager in upstate New York. Growing up, her world was modest. Family cookouts, community fundraisers, and Sunday strolls around a quaint Main Street. But beneath that wholesome upbringing lay an unyielding spark of ambition. She earned a scholarship to an Ivy League university and relocated to the city that never sleeps, New York. It was at a high-profile charity gala during her junior year of college that she first crossed paths with Ambrose Blackwell. Back then, Ambrose was an emerging entrepreneur determined to make his mark on Manhattan's cutthroat real estate market. Jacqueline, volunteering at the gala on behalf of a scholarship committee, wasn't part of the city's elite. But Ambrose saw something special in her. He introduced himself with a polished confidence that came naturally to him. She found his aura magnetic, his laughter, his sharp intelligence, the way he filled a room without seeming to try. They began dating. Their first year was a blissful whirlwind of candlelit dinners, late-night walks along the Hudson, and stolen weekends in the Hamptons. By the time Ambrose secured his first major real estate deal, a multi-million-dollar development in Brooklyn, Jacqueline stood beside him as his unwavering partner. She offered a quiet stability to balance his aggressive drive. Yet, from the outset, there were subtle warning signs. Ambrose relished the spotlight, craving validation. He courted wealthy investors with relentless fervor, attending opulent parties that sometimes stretched until dawn. He claimed it was just part of the business, and Jacqueline accepted it at face value. She wanted to believe that her husband's thirst for success was a harmless byproduct of an ambitious soul. If he occasionally grew evasive or came home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers, she chalked it up to the precarious nature of real estate networking. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Plaza Hotel. The wedding garnered coverage in lifestyle magazines, featuring photos of Jacqueline in a custom-made gown and Ambrose smiling with triumphant pride. Their honeymoon in Bali seemed to seal the promise of a lifetime of happiness. But after the wedding, the cracks started to widen. Ambrose's hours became more erratic, and the hush-hush phone calls under the guise of business negotiations multiplied. Strangers at charity events whispered rumors about his rumored escapades. Each time, Jacqueline confronted him with gentle questions, only to receive half answers and patronizing pats on the head. Now, sitting alone in their penthouse apartment, pregnant and filled with dread, Jacqueline realized that all those faint alarm bells she dismissed were about to become a deafening chorus. This was the night she would finally confront the truth and Ambrose's betrayal head-on. The penthouse in Midtown Manhattan, where Jacqueline and Ambrose lived, was a testament to his extraordinary ascent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, from the neon of Times Square to the shimmering waters of the East River. Yet this evening, the breathtaking view only heightened Jacqueline's sense of isolation. She could see the world below continuing its electrifying pace while her own life seemed frozen in a devastating standstill. Jacqueline sat on a velvet chaise lounge, drumming her fingers against her swollen belly. She was 5 months pregnant, and every movement of the child within her reminded her that decisions made now would echo into another life. Ambrose was still absent, and the clock on the wall edged toward midnight. "Do you think he's okay?" her friend Lauren Kim had asked earlier over the phone. Lauren, who had known Jacqueline since high school, was the sounding board for all her confidences. "Or is he just, out again?" Jacqueline forced a strained chuckle. He's fine, I'm sure. Probably just lost in negotiations with some investor, or so he'll claim. The truth was, Lauren's question tapped into Jacqueline's deepest fears. That Ambrose was with someone else, that the rumors she had brushed aside for so long were all too real. As the hours ticked by, old suspicions she tried to bury rose to the surface. She recalled an incident 2 months prior when he returned from a business dinner at 3 a.m., reeking of an unfamiliar perfume. When confronted, he waved off her concerns with a dismissive, "This is how deals get done, Jackie. Don't be paranoid." Her phone buzzed, startling her from her thoughts. She hoped it was Ambrose, but the screen displayed a text from her friend Amanda Harrison, referencing swirling whispers at an upscale lounge called Seraphim. Ambrose spotted with a new female companion. Not an investor. Be careful. Her hand shook. Amanda was rarely one for gossip, preferring to keep her opinions to herself. If she'd bothered to send that text, it was because she cared deeply about Jacqueline's emotional safety. The baby kicked again, and Jacqueline closed her eyes, tears brimming. This has to end, she thought, her resolve forming. My child deserves better, and so do I. She rose slowly, stepping across the penthouse's polished marble floor to the master bedroom. In the walk-in closet, nestled behind her designer handbags, lay a manila envelope she had prepared with her attorney days ago. Inside were the divorce papers, lacking only her final signature. She had prayed she wouldn't need them, but that night, alone and anxious, she accepted the grim truth. Her husband's priorities lay elsewhere, and come morning, she would no longer be the docile wife waiting at home. At precisely 3:17 a.m., Ambrose Blackwell stepped off the private elevator and into the dimly lit foyer of his penthouse. The overhead chandelier cast ghostly reflections on the marble floor. He felt a dull ache in his temples, too many glasses of champagne, perhaps. He straightened his navy suit jacket, attempting to mask the faint scent of gardenia that clung to him, an aroma not belonging to Jacqueline. He removed his shoes to avoid making noise, only to find her standing in the shadows near the living room's grand piano. Startled, he froze, his polished facade momentarily cracking. "Jacqueline, why are you still up?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She didn't respond right away. In the low light, Ambrose noticed the exhaustion etched into her features, the way she cradled her belly protectively. It was a poignant reminder that she was carrying his child, the child he had claimed to want so desperately, even as he'd lost himself in the arms of another woman. "I couldn't sleep," she finally said, her tone brittle. "I was worried about you." The words emerged clipped, lacking her usual warmth. She wore a long robe and slippers, but her posture was tense, as if preparing for battle. Ambrose plastered on his confident smile, the one he used in negotiations. "I told you, sweetheart, business runs late. You didn't have to wait up." Jacqueline eyed the frustration and sorrow swirling in her eyes. Who was she? The question hung in the air like a live wire. A flicker of alarm passed over Ambrose's face. "What do you mean?" "I was at a meeting." She shook her head, tears glistening. "Don't lie to me. I can smell the perfume. I can see the lipstick smudged on your collar." She gestured toward his shirt, her voice trembling with restrained fury. The rumors, the gossip, the unexplained absences, all of it points to the same conclusion. Ambrose opened his mouth to concoct yet another excuse, but one look at Jacqueline's tearful determination, and he faltered. The memory of his recent entanglement at Seraphim Lounge flickered through his mind. Champagne toasts, stolen kisses, a whispered promise that he had no intention of keeping. He knew at that moment there was no denying the truth. His silence spoke volumes. Jacqueline pressed her lips together, shoulders stiffening. "We're done, Ambrose." Her voice quivered despite her conviction. "I've reached my limit." She turned away, moving toward the kitchen counter, where a folder lay waiting. His heart twisted as he recognized the legal stationery. He had half expected this day, but never imagined it would come so soon or so abruptly. As she held out the divorce papers with trembling hands, Ambrose realized this night's betrayal was not just another fleeting mistake. This was the act that would unravel everything he and Jacqueline had once cherished. Ambrose stared at the manila folder, which seemed to radiate a damning glow under the overhead light. In that moment, the gravity of his choices crushed him like an avalanche of regret and confusion. Jacqueline, her composure brittle, placed the folder on the glossy marble countertop. She flipped open the cover, revealing the stark legal language, complaint for divorce. He struggled to swallow. Jacqueline, wait. Let's talk, he managed, voice raw. We can work this out. Don't do anything rash. Her expression, taut with sorrow, offered no mercy. Rash? I've tolerated your deceptions for months, maybe years. I gave you the benefit of the doubt time and time again. She glanced down at her protruding belly, grief flickering in her eyes. We're bringing a child into this world, Ambrose. A baby who deserves parents who respect each other. Ambrose felt a surge of shame. How often had he stood at a podium, touting his success story for all to admire? He'd come from humble beginnings in Queens, hustling through college while juggling multiple jobs, forging powerful connections until he reached the upper echelon. But in that journey to amass wealth, he lost track of the values that once kept him grounded. He reached for her, but she recoiled, an unspoken barrier forming between them. We could do therapy, he said, voice cracking. We can see Dr. Naomi Carter. Didn't your friend mention her? She's helped couples. Jacqueline's bitter laugh cut him off. It's too late. You think I haven't asked for these things before? Or begged you to let me in, to explain what's going on in those late-night business meetings you keep attending? You brushed off every concern I had. Ambrose's mouth went dry. He recalled dozens of nights when Jacqueline had pleaded with him to slow down, to stay home instead of rubbing shoulders with Manhattan's elite. She had watched him slip further into a world of glitz, champagne, and flattery. Each broken promise had piled on top of the last, building toward this inevitable collapse. Her eyes glistened. I can't let our child grow up witnessing this. Lies, infidelity, constant doubt. With trembling fingers, she flipped through the pages, stopping at the lines that allocated property, determined custody rights once the baby was born, and spelled out the legal grounds for ending their marriage. Sign it, don't sign it, I don't care. But I'm filing for divorce. Ambrose's mind whirled. He envisioned the tabloids, the potential business fallout, the humiliating public spectacle of a scandalous separation. But overshadowing all of that was the crushing realization that the woman he'd loved and married was prepared to leave him forever. And deep down, he couldn't argue that he didn't deserve it. Jacqueline retreated to the other side of the penthouse's open-concept living room, seeking distance from Ambrose. She inhaled sharply, trying to still the trembling in her limbs. She'd imagined this confrontation countless times, rehearsed the words she would say, but no amount of mental preparation could soften the sting of real heartbreak. Ambrose, rooted to the spot by the countertop, found himself grappling with a sudden sense of helplessness. The unstoppable businessman, known for cutting ruthless deals, was now undone in the eyes of the one person whose opinion mattered most. He tried to speak, but the words lodged in his throat. Suddenly, the phone buzzed on the coffee table. A series of texts lit up the screen, likely from the very person who'd accompanied him at Seraphim. Jacqueline noticed, and her face contorted. That momentary flicker of phone light was proof enough. She swallowed, forcing herself not to cry. Do you realize, she said, her voice thick with anger, that this is the worst possible time to do this to me? I'm carrying your child, Ambrose. Her eyes pleaded for an explanation, any explanation that could make this betrayal hurt less. His shoulders sagged. I know, he whispered, stepping forward cautiously. I know. I was stupid, Jackie. I let everything get out of hand. The business, the success, the attention, it consumed me, and I lost sight of what really mattered. You, us, our baby. She scoffed, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. Now you realize that. The question lingered. The city lights twinkled mockingly behind them, as if Manhattan itself bore witness to this unraveling. All those nights I stayed up waiting. All those times I asked you to just be honest with me. And you think a simple confession now will make it better. Ambrose stepped closer, the ghost of a tear in his eye. "I've destroyed our marriage," he said, voice strained. "I see it, and I hate myself for it. If there's a chance, if there's anything I can do, tell me, please." Jacqueline's chest felt tight, tears burning behind her eyelids. Part of her, the old hopeful part, wanted to fold into his arms and pretend everything could be erased. But she'd learned too many painful lessons to indulge that fantasy. At last, she mustered a calm veneer. "I don't have any illusions left, Ambrose. We're done." He deflated visibly, like a balloon losing air. The weight of finality pressed upon both of them. For a moment, neither spoke, as if the penthouse's opulence, the paintings, the designer furniture, the city skyline had become a silent chorus of condemnation. Wordlessly, Jacqueline reached over and closed the divorce folder. She took a breath, summoning every ounce of resolve. Tomorrow, she would take those papers to her lawyer, finalize them, and step into an unknown future one without Ambrose by her side. And for all his regret, Ambrose understood there might be no turning back from this precipice he had so carelessly approached. Sleep proved elusive for Jacqueline. By 5 a.m., she had abandoned any hope of rest and stood by the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn break over Manhattan. The rising sun painted the sky in muted pinks and oranges, a subtle reminder that life moved on, indifferent to her personal crisis. She cradled her belly, whispering reassurances to the baby. Though her heart felt as if it was splintering, she resolved that her child would not inherit her sorrow. Ambrose had finally retreated to the guest bedroom, though she suspected he didn't sleep either. She could still sense his presence, an unwanted gravitational force pulling at her equilibrium. She tiptoed through the living room, scanning the marbled hallway with dread. The weight of the manila folder seemed to intensify with every step. By mid-morning, she had called a car service to whisk her away to the Upper East Side, where her longtime friend and confidant Lauren Kim lived in a modest but welcoming apartment. Lauren opened the door in a flurry of concern, throwing her arms around Jacqueline the moment she saw her tear-streaked face. "Oh, Jackie," Lauren murmured, guiding her into the cozy living room. The space was worlds away from Jacqueline's penthouse, smaller, cluttered with personal touches like postcard from travels and stacks of books. Yet the warmth here offered a stark contrast to the sterile grandeur she had left behind. Jacqueline settled onto a plush sofa, exhaling shakily. "I couldn't stay there," she admitted, tears threatening to spill again. "I filed for divorce. Or I will. The papers are ready." Lauren's eyes widened. "Finally," she said gently, squeezing Jacqueline's hand. "I know it hurts, but you've been in pain for too long. You deserve better. Your baby deserves better." A single tear rolled down Jacqueline's cheek. "I wanted to believe he could change, that we could be happy. It's just every time I gave him a chance, he turned around and betrayed that trust." Lauren nodded knowingly. She had been the silent witness to Ambrose's pattern of late nights and half-truths. "So what now?" Jacqueline sighed, pressing a protective hand against her abdomen. "I have to protect my child first and foremost. I'll stay with you for a few days, if that's okay, until I figure out my next steps." "Of course," Lauren replied without hesitation. "You can stay as long as you need." She paused, then added, "Have you considered speaking with your lawyer about custody and support? Ambrose might try to manipulate the situation." Jacqueline grimaced, recalling how Ambrose's wealth often gave him an edge in legal battles. "I will," she promised. "I won't let him wiggle out of his responsibilities. But I don't want my baby growing up in a broken home either. I'm so torn." As she nestled deeper into the sofa's comforting cushions, Jacqueline felt a rush of gratitude for Lauren's unwavering support. She had taken the first step toward freedom, even though it meant walking through a storm of uncertainty. Less than 24 hours later, Jacqueline stood inside the Midtown Manhattan offices of Chambers and Delgado, one of the city's most reputable law firms. The polished marble floors and sleek modern decor reminded her of Ambrose's penthouse. Everything was designed to exude power and precision. Her heart pounded as she approached the reception desk, manila folder clutched to her chest. A polished assistant guided her into an expansive corner office with glass walls overlooking the bustling streets below. There she met her attorney, Rebecca Delgado, a poised woman in her early 40s known for her incisive approach to family law. Rebecca offered a professional smile, gesturing for Jacqueline to sit in a leather armchair. "Jacqueline," Rebecca began, her voice warm but businesslike, "I'm sorry you're going through this. I've reviewed the preliminary paperwork you sent over. Given your husband's net worth, we can petition for substantial alimony and child support." Jacqueline nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I understand. I'm not out to destroy him, but he's proven he can't be trusted, especially financially. I need to ensure my baby is provided for, no matter what." Rebecca leaned forward, hands folded neatly on her desk. "I absolutely agree. Next steps include filing the official petition for divorce with the court. We'll detail Ambrose's infidelity as the grounds, along with any supporting evidence you have, documents, statements from witnesses, or even text messages. This will bolster your case if he contests any part of it." Jacqueline's thoughts flicked to the late-night texts and photos she'd seen from friends like Amanda Harrison referencing Ambrose's indiscretions. She hated the idea of airing her marital troubles in court, but pride had to take a back seat to practical considerations. "I've got a paper trail," she admitted quietly, "though I hoped I'd never have to use it." Rebecca nodded sympathetically. "I'll need access to everything: bank accounts, property deeds, the baby's medical documents, anything that can clarify the financial and parental landscape. Are you planning to stay with your friend Lauren while this goes forward?" Jacqueline brushed away a stray tear. "Yes, at least for now. I can't return to the penthouse. I just can't face him." Rebecca's expression softened. "I understand, but keep in mind, if Ambrose insists, he has the right to remain in your marital home unless a court orders otherwise. Emotional distances aren't always recognized by law." Her chest tightened. The enormity of the legal process was more daunting than she'd anticipated. "So, what do you recommend I do right away?" "File for temporary spousal support and exclusive occupancy of the penthouse if you want it. We can argue that you're pregnant, and it's crucial for your well-being to have stability. The court often takes these factors into account." Jacqueline exhaled, her knuckles white around the manila folder. "All right," she said finally. "Let's do it." As she signed a retainer agreement and handed over the official divorce papers, she felt a wave of mingled relief and apprehension. She was stepping onto a battlefield, armed with legal counsel and her own unwavering resolve. The next challenge was Ambrose himself and how he would respond when he realized she intended to hold him accountable. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Ambrose was caught in a spiral of regret. He paced across the polished floors, pausing occasionally to glare at the phone that had betrayed his clandestine affairs. Every sound within the silent apartment seemed amplified: the hum of the air conditioning, the occasional rush of traffic from the streets below. By midday, he decided to consult his own attorney, Atticus Chambers, the co-founder of the same firm Jacqueline had visited. However, Ambrose had established a prior professional relationship with Atticus in a different capacity: real estate and corporate law. Staring at the swirling cityscape beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Ambrose placed the call. "Ambrose." Atticus greeted, a note of concern in his voice. "I heard you're facing some personal issues. How can I help?" Ambrose hesitated, swallowing the knot in his throat. "I need the best possible defense in a divorce," he admitted, voice tight. "Jacqueline is pregnant, and she's leaving me. I messed up, Atticus, but I can't lose everything." Atticus was silent for a moment, no doubt processing the gravity of the situation. "Is there a chance you can salvage this without going to court? Mediation, perhaps?" Ambrose closed his eyes, picturing Jacqueline's tearful face and the betrayal he'd etched into their marriage. "I'd like to, but she handed me divorce papers. And she's with Delgado's office, I'm sure. They're known for not backing down when it comes to spousal support or child custody." Atticus exhaled. "Then we'll prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. First, we need a thorough understanding of your assets, properties, bank accounts, stock options, everything. We can't let them paint you as a flight risk or someone trying to hide assets." That'll only make the judge less sympathetic. Ambrose ran a hand through his hair, recalling how many times he'd boasted about having everything in order. Now it felt like his world was unraveling. I'll send you my financials. Atticus paused. Ambrose, be ready for a fight. If there's documented evidence of infidelity, that might influence the judge's perspective on alimony and custody. If you can show you're repentant and willing to be a responsible father, it might help. A pang shot through Ambrose's heart at the word father. He hadn't even been present for the last sonogram. Instead, he'd been out at Seraphim, drinking with a woman whose name he barely cared to remember. I'll do whatever it takes, he murmured, clenching his jaw. I won't let her slip away without showing her I can change. When the call ended, he noticed the hush in the penthouse had deepened, as though the walls themselves disapproved of his betrayal. Plagued by guilt, he retrieved his phone and stared at Jacqueline's contact photo, a snapshot of her smiling radiantly on a beach vacation. With trembling fingers, he typed a message. I'm sorry. I'm here. Please let me be part of the baby's life. He pressed send, fully aware that an apology alone might not be enough to mend the wreckage he'd created. Jacqueline's phone buzzed with Ambrose's text while she sat at Lauren's kitchen table, sipping lukewarm tea. She read the message, full of remorse and pleas to be part of the baby's life, and felt her heart constrict. A swirl of anger, sadness, and an odd flicker of sympathy churned within her. She carefully placed the phone face down on the table, deciding not to respond. Lauren observed from the stove, where she was warming some oatmeal for breakfast. He's not giving up, is he? She asked softly. Jacqueline shook her head. He says he's sorry, that he wants to be involved, but I don't know if I can trust that anymore. I'm so tired, Lauren. Her friend left the stove and wrapped her in a warm embrace. It's okay to feel that way. You've been carrying this alone for so long. Jacqueline appreciated the support. She stroked her belly, marveling at how pregnancy could evoke such fierce protectiveness. Each flutter from within reminded her that she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for an innocent life, depending on her judgment. She let out a sigh. Rebecca says the next step is to finalize the filing, serve Ambrose with the papers formally. She also advised me to consider a restraining order if he becomes overly aggressive or tries to force me back. Lauren frowned. Do you think he'd do that? Jacqueline hesitated, recalling Ambrose's occasional bursts of anger during high-stress business deals. Though he had never physically harmed her, she wasn't naive about how desperation could change a person. I hope not, she admitted, but I've seen how ruthless he can be in negotiations. This might be no different. They shared a moment of silence, each lost in her own thoughts. Outside, city sounds wafted through the open window. The rumble of traffic, a distant car horn, a snippet of conversation. Life proceeded at its frenetic pace, oblivious to Jacqueline's private turmoil. Have you told your mother yet? Lauren asked gently. Jacqueline shook her head, guilt creeping in. Her mother, Margaret Mitchell, lived in that same small town upstate where Jacqueline was raised. The woman cherished Ambrose like a son, bragging about his success to every neighbor. I can't bear to break her heart, she whispered. She thought I found my prince. Lauren offered a sad smile. Better to tell her than to hide it. You could use her comfort right now. Jacqueline nodded, steeling herself. She would need her mother's unwavering love and guidance, especially as she navigated the upcoming legal battle. For now, she decided to focus on her own mental well-being. She drank the last of her tea, mentally rehearsing how to remain calm when the real storm of lawsuits, property evaluations, and custody petitions hit. Above all, she vowed never to compromise the safety and future of her child, no matter how remorseful Ambrose became. 2 days later, Manhattan's unpredictable weather delivered a downpour that turned city sidewalks into rivers. Jacqueline, determined to keep her scheduled prenatal checkup at Mount Sinai Hospital, ventured out beneath a black umbrella. She felt a twinge of anxiety. Her usual routine had included Ambrose accompanying her to these appointments, at least in the early stages of her pregnancy. But he was gone now, by her choice, and she tried to steady her nerves as she stepped off the bus near the hospital entrance. Inside, the bright fluorescent lights, and the murmur of patients checking in offered a semblance of normalcy. She gave her name to the receptionist and took a seat, ignoring the curious glances of strangers who might have recognized her from society pages. The Blackwell's union had been as public as it was glamorous, and rumor mills churned incessantly about their troubles. A few minutes passed before a nurse beckoned her. "Ms. S. Blackwell," she called, slightly mispronouncing the name in a hurry. Jacqueline stood, self-conscious about her new reality. She might not carry that last name for much longer. She settled into the exam room, waiting for Dr. Naomi Carter to arrive. Dr. Carter was a warm, experienced obstetrician who had seen countless couples through pregnancy. After a few minutes, the door opened and Jacqueline's stomach lurched as she saw Ambrose step inside behind Dr. Carter. The doctor offered a polite smile. "I apologize for the surprise. Mr. Blackwell insisted on attending today's appointment. He said you might have forgotten to inform me otherwise." Jacqueline's mind raced. She swallowed her shock and reminded herself to remain calm. Ambrose stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his eyes pleading. "I just wanted to make sure everything's okay with the baby," he said softly. "Please let me stay. I won't argue. I promise." A torrent of emotions slammed into her. Part of her was furious at his audacity, showing up unannounced after she'd taken steps to leave him. Another part, the part that remembered how eagerly he had awaited the first ultrasound, softened. She met Dr. Carter's gaze, uncertain. "It's entirely up to you," Dr. Carter said gently. "I can ask him to leave if you're uncomfortable." Jacqueline's heart pounded, but she forced a nod. "He can stay," she murmured, her voice strained. Ambrose took a seat near the exam table, awkwardly folding his hands in his lap. Dr. Carter proceeded with the routine checks, measuring Jacqueline's belly, checking her blood pressure, asking about any discomfort or symptoms. All the while, Ambrose remained uncharacteristically silent, his gaze fixed on Jacqueline's face or the fetal heartbeat monitor. When the whooshing sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, Jacqueline couldn't help but feel a wave of tears threaten. Ambrose's eyes glossed over, too, a glimpse of the paternal joy he might have felt if not for the chasm between them. Still, the moment the exam ended, Jacqueline's resolve returned. She pulled her coat tighter around her, preparing to leave as quickly as possible. Ambrose had intruded on her safe space, but no matter how genuine his remorse, she wouldn't let him derail her choices again. As soon as Dr. Carter left the room, Jacqueline slipped off the exam table, determined to exit before Ambrose could corner her. But he moved quickly, stepping in front of the door, though not aggressively, just enough to indicate he had something important to say. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said, his tone hushed, conscious of the bustling hospital corridor beyond. "I know you didn't have to do that." Jacqueline avoided his gaze, focusing instead on adjusting the zipper of her coat. She felt the tension in the air and the knot in her chest grow tighter. "Don't read too much into it," she replied. "I'm just not looking for a scene." He nodded, sorrow flashing across his features. "I understand, but I need you to know something, Jackie." He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm not fighting you because I want revenge. I'm fighting for our marriage because I can't imagine my life without you and our baby." Jacqueline's anger flared, overshadowing the heartache. "You couldn't imagine life without us?" she echoed, voice trembling. "Then why did you risk everything for one night with a mistress or however many nights it was?" He grimaced, recalling the impulsive fling that had turned into a wretched milestone of betrayal. "I was weak. I was enticed by the thrill of it, the ego boost, and I know how pathetic that sounds, but I never stopped loving you." She placed a hand protectively over her stomach, drawing strength from the child growing inside her. "You have a strange way of showing love, Ambrose." She brushed away the tears threatening to fall. "Let's stop pretending you can fix this with an apology and a single show of concern at a doctor's appointment. I've already started the divorce process. You'll get the papers soon enough." Ambrose's face fell. He ran a hand through his damp hair, each breath shaky. "What if just hear me out? What if we tried counseling? I'll do anything. I'll cut back on my hours, shut out the toxic crowd. Everything. I swear." Her mind flashed to nights spent alone in bed, waiting for him to return, calls going to voicemail, whispered excuses in the morning. She pictured how she'd consoled herself with illusions that he would change once the baby was born. "I asked you for therapy months ago," she said, voice tight. "You laughed it off, said we didn't need a stranger telling us how to run our marriage." Ambrose's eyes glistened with regret. "I was a fool." Jacqueline exhaled. "You still are if you think I can forget what you did." With that, she brushed past him, stepping into the corridor. The hospital environment beeping monitors, brisk nurses, anxious families felt jarringly normal compared to the emotional tempest she was enduring. Ambrose called her name softly, but she didn't turn back. There was no place for him in her decisions anymore, no matter how desperately he pleaded otherwise. Back at Lauren's apartment, Jacqueline shut herself in the spare bedroom, flipping through a folder of documents Rebecca Delgado had sent. Each page underscored the reality she was stepping into: a formal petition for divorce, an affidavit that described Ambrose's infidelity, and financial disclosures that mapped out his net worth. A swirl of conflicting emotions, sorrow, resolve, anxiety gripped her. Lauren knocked softly, then opened the door. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice brimming with concern. Jacqueline placed the papers aside. "No," she admitted, "but I'm doing what needs to be done." Lauren sat beside her on the bed, offering a comforting pat on the shoulder. "I overheard you telling Dr. Carter that Ambrose showed up at the appointment. That must have been so stressful." Jacqueline nodded. "He's begging for another chance. Counseling, less work, no more late nights. You know, all the things I asked him for months ago." Lauren sighed. "Sometimes people only realize what they have when they lose it. That's the tragic part," Jacqueline replied quietly. "He's realizing it now, but the damage is already done. I am exhausted, Lauren. I don't want to keep playing this game of cat and mouse, chasing after his heart, trying to keep him faithful." Her friend gave her a sympathetic hug. "You won't be alone in this. We'll figure out a plan for you and the baby. I promise." Just as they parted, Jacqueline's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from her old hometown. Her mother. She inhaled sharply, remembering how she had been dreading this conversation. Shooting Lauren a glance of silent support, she answered. "Hi, Mom," she began, her voice wavering. There was no way to sugarcoat the news. "I have something to tell you about me and Ambrose." Her mother's concerned greeting turned to heartbreak as Jacqueline explained the situation, voice trembling. Margaret Mitchell's shock was palpable, even through the phone line. She asked countless questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't Jacqueline said something earlier? Was there any hope for reconciliation? Each query hit Jacqueline like a fresh stab to her conscience. By the end of the call, her mother was weeping, promising to help in any way possible. "Come home, Jackie," she pleaded. "Let's figure this out together." Jacqueline promised she'd consider it, though she was reluctant to leave the city where she had built her life. After hanging up, she slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt the weight of her mother's disappointment, the avalanche of legal decisions, and the pang of her unborn child's uncertain future. Lauren quietly placed a hand on Jacqueline's shoulder. "Storms never last forever," she said softly. "You're doing the right thing, even if it hurts." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, echoing the storm inside her heart. Despite the deluge of grief, Jacqueline reminded herself of a vital truth. She was free now, free to shape her life without deception or fear. 2 weeks later, Manhattan's relentless pace churned on as if nothing had changed. But for Jacqueline, everything had. She remained at Lauren's apartment, forging a new semblance of routine. Morning walks around the block to ease her pregnancy aches. Afternoons spent reviewing legal briefs with Rebecca Delgado, and evenings curled up on the sofa, her mind drifting between worry and anticipation for what lay ahead. Rebecca had scheduled a mediation session, a required step before the divorce could be finalized. It was a chance for both parties, along with their attorneys, to meet in a controlled setting and attempt to settle matters outside of court. Jacqueline's emotions were mixed. She dreaded facing Ambrose again, yet hoped this might expedite her release from the marriage. On the morning of the mediation, she stood before a mirror in Lauren's bedroom, smoothing down a simple navy maternity dress that offered both comfort and quiet confidence. She inhaled, placing a hand on her stomach. The baby gave a small, reassuring kick. "We'll get through this," she whispered. At the mediator's office, a sleek, minimalist suite in a midtown high-rise, Jacqueline arrived with Rebecca. They were ushered into a conference room featuring a large glass table and leather chairs. A window overlooked the bustling cityscape, as if reminding them that life went on, indifferent to personal woes. Ambrose was already seated at the far side of the table, accompanied by Atticus Chambers. He rose when he saw Jacqueline, his eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and remorse. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on placing her purse neatly on the chair. The mediator, a seasoned professional named Daphne Morales, began by outlining the ground rules: respect, honesty, and a genuine willingness to negotiate. Her calm, even tone briefly eased the tension in the room. Rebecca spoke first, citing Jacqueline's reasons for divorce: adultery, emotional neglect, and the need for financial security for both mother and child. She requested substantial alimony, child support, and exclusive occupancy of the penthouse until the child turned 1. Ambrose's brow furrowed, but he remained silent, seemingly trying to rein in his impulses to argue. When it was Atticus's turn, he acknowledged Ambrose's infidelity, but claimed it was a momentary lapse, urging Jacqueline to allow a chance for reconciliation. He proposed a reduced alimony period, a more modest child support package, and shared custody once the baby was born. The word shared custody made Jacqueline's heart lurch. She pictured the baby's crib in one home, then another, back and forth, an infant too young to understand parental strife. Each hour crawled by as they exchanged offers and counteroffers. At times, Ambrose tried to address Jacqueline directly, but Rebecca firmly steered him toward the official process. The tension was suffocating, broken occasionally by the mediator's calm voice, coaxing them to meet in the middle. By late afternoon, a tentative agreement emerged. Ambrose was prepared to offer a sizable monthly support sum and let Jacqueline stay in the penthouse for a year, after which they would sell it and split the proceeds. In exchange, he wanted liberal visitation, rights to the child, along with joint legal custody for key decisions. Jacqueline felt her insides twist at the notion of sharing such crucial decisions with him. Yet she also recognized the baby deserved a father. They left the session exhausted. No final resolution in place, but the outlines of a settlement taking shape. Stepping into the elevator with Rebecca, Jacqueline exhaled shakily. She felt like she had just run a marathon, both physically and emotionally. "This is just the beginning," Rebecca cautioned. "But it's a good sign they're willing to negotiate." Jacqueline nodded, resting a hand on her belly. For the first time, she saw a glimmer of an ending to this emotional stalemate. Whether Ambrose would honor his promises or sabotage them remained to be seen, but she vowed that she would never again sacrifice her dignity or her child's well-being in the face of betrayal. Over the following month, negotiations continued in a flurry of emails, phone calls, and occasional in-person meetings with the mediator. Each new draft of the divorce settlement inched closer to a resolution that both parties could tolerate, though neither was entirely satisfied. Ambrose clung to the hope that through these interactions, he could persuade Jacqueline to reconsider ending their marriage. But every time he tried to slip in a personal plea, she reminded him calmly and firmly that this was a legal process, not marriage counseling. One crisp morning, Jacqueline received a call from Rebecca. "We have a date for the final hearing," her attorney announced. "In a week's time, we can go before the judge and solidify this settlement." Jacqueline's chest tightened at the news. A part of her felt relief. She would soon be free from the limbo of her deteriorated marriage. Yet a pang of sadness bloomed, too. This wasn't how she'd pictured her family life. Not once had she imagined being pregnant and alone, hashing out custody terms. Still, a calm certainty underlay her sorrow. She needed to safeguard her child from a toxic environment. The morning of the final hearing dawned cold and drizzly. Jacqueline dressed carefully in a tailored black maternity dress, determined to appear resolute yet respectful before the court. Lauren accompanied her, offering emotional support. They met Rebecca at the courthouse steps, a neoclassical building whose columns loomed under the gray sky. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Ambrose and Atticus sat at the opposing table, their expressions grim. A handful of onlookers, curious bystanders, and a couple of reporters who recognized them occupied the benches. Jacqueline took a seat, ignoring the flutter in her stomach that may have been either nerves or the baby's kicks. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The hearing began with formality, statements from each attorney, confirmation of identities, an overview of the proposed settlement. Jacqueline tried not to look at Ambrose, focusing instead on the judge's measured voice. The terms were laid out: alimony, child support, custody rights, property distribution. A hush fell as the judge asked if both parties agreed to the stipulations. Ambrose cleared his throat, glancing at Jacqueline. For a moment, she feared he might fight again, but when he spoke, his voice was soft. "I agree, Your Honor." The judge turned to Jacqueline. "Mrs. Blackwell, do you concur with these terms?" She exhaled, a swirl of relief and heartbreak swirling in her chest. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, voice steady. "Ido." With that, the gavel descended, and the legal dissolution of their marriage was set in motion. Cameras flashed from a reporter's phone, capturing the final end of a once-envied union. The judge concluded the proceedings and left the bench, leaving Jacqueline and Ambrose to navigate a crowded corridor of onlookers. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Jacqueline met Ambrose's gaze. She recognized the pain there, a reflection of her own. But this was the road they had chosen. He threw betrayal, she threw hard-won self-protection. A solitary tear slipped down her cheek, which she quickly brushed away. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, each step a reclaiming of her future. A week after the hearing, Jacqueline Blackwell's divorce was officially recognized by the court. She awoke on a brisk, sunlit morning in Lauren's apartment with a sense of finality and a subtle thrill of possibility. It was as though she had shed an enormous burden. Yes, she was still pregnant. Yes, her life was fraught with challenges, but she had also reclaimed her identity, forging a path no longer shadowed by Ambrose's deceptions. She moved about the apartment quietly, preparing a modest breakfast of toast and orange juice. Lauren had already left for work, leaving her a sweet note of encouragement on the kitchen table. Jacqueline smiled at her friend's thoughtfulness, then opened her laptop to check emails. One caught her eye, a notification from Rebecca confirming the final filing details and attaching the signed judgment of divorce. It was done, really done. Her phone buzzed with a new text message from Ambrose. "I know the marriage is over, but I'd like to be at the next prenatal appointment. Let me know if that's possible." She felt a twinge of mixed emotion. The settlement granted him the right to participate in major pregnancy milestones and eventual co-parenting. Reading his plea, she sensed genuine remorse in his words, but also understood that trust is not something that can be conjured overnight. Jacqueline typed a measured reply. "The appointment is next Thursday at 2 p.m. If you want to be there, show up. I won't stop you." After hitting send, she closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She wanted what was best for her child, even if that meant allowing Ambrose to form a relationship under her watchful guard. As the day wore on, she began searching online for apartments closer to her old neighborhood. She had saved enough money from the settlement to live comfortably while planning a new career path. Part of her wanted a small place in Brooklyn, near the quiet streets and community vibe she'd fallen in love with when she first moved to the city. Another part of her contemplated returning to her childhood hometown for a more peaceful environment to raise the baby. For now, she had options, and that was enough. In the evening, she curled up on the living room couch, nibbling on fruit slices as she flipped through a baby name book. She paused on a few names that resonated: Adeline, Sebastian, Eliana, Jude. Smiling, she imagined a future that belonged solely to her and her child, free from the shackles of betrayal. A wave of gratitude washed over her. Despite the pain, she had found her way to a new beginning. Jacqueline's story reminds us that even the brightest fairy tales can unravel when deceit enters the picture. The glittering life she once shared with Ambrose collapsed under the weight of infidelity, forcing her to confront heartbreak and navigate a complex legal maze. Yet through every crushing disappointment, Jacqueline discovered a wellspring of inner strength, one that guided her to protect her unborn child and reclaim her own identity. Years passed. Jacqueline named her beautiful baby girl Eliana, a name that meant "my God has answered." She did move to Brooklyn, finding a charming brownstone apartment with a small garden. True to her ambitions, she started a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering women who had escaped difficult relationships, using her own story as a quiet inspiration. Eliana grew into a bright, joyful child, the center of Jacqueline's world. Ambrose, humbled by his losses, did attend every prenatal appointment. He was there, albeit nervously, for Eliana's birth. He took his co-parenting responsibilities seriously, transforming from the self-absorbed millionaire into a father who showed up for school plays and weekend park visits. He never fully regained Jacqueline's trust for romantic reconciliation, nor did she seek it, but they forged a respectful, working relationship for Eliana's sake. He often told Eliana how much he admired her mother's strength. Jacqueline found a profound peace she never knew in her gilded cage. She reconnected with the simple joys, community gatherings, laughter with Lauren, who became Eliana's godmother, and the quiet satisfaction of building a life on her own terms. One sunny afternoon, while Eliana played in their garden, Jacqueline watched her, a serene smile on her face. She was no longer just Jacqueline Blackwell, the scorned wife, but Jacqueline Mitchell, a mother, a leader, and a woman who had turned her deepest pain into her greatest power. Her fairy tale hadn't ended. It had simply been rewritten with a much stronger, more authentic heroine. Thank you for watching and experiencing Jacqueline's emotional journey with us. If this tale of love, betrayal, and resilience resonated with you, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who appreciate gripping real-life dramas, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more powerful stories. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content, and we're grateful to have you join us on this roller coaster of human emotions. Stay tuned for our next story.